Welcome, everyone, to Warts and All, Sustaining a Career in Literary Translation. This panel is part of the Advanced German to English Translation Workshop that is organized by the BCLT, the British Centre for Literary Translation, the National Centre for Writing, and Goethe Institute London, as well as New Books in German. So thank you all for the sponsors and organizers. I would like to invite my co-panelists to just come on camera. We have Ruth, Martin, and Alice Guthrie, and Anton, who is going on his way to join us shortly. Before I introduce them, I just want to say a few words about what this panel is about. It sometimes looks and feels that like this is a better time than ever to be a literary literary translator. There is an influx of impressive talent into the field, an appetite for experimentation, daring questions, and groundbreaking conversations. Translation ethics breaking through their academic confines to inform aesthetic and literary explorations. Indie publishers taking risks and amassing prizes. In Anglophone translation spheres, at least, there are institutional and social, actual and virtual communities that transcend borders and source languages, where the divide between literary and non-literary translation is routinely challenged. The pros and cons of visibility are debated, and contract negotiation advice is exchanged. Recent UK publishing stats show a steep rise in the share of translated fiction from Europe and beyond. We are no longer stuck at the 3% that made me question my life choices when I first got into translation in 2010. Yet, for many translators, negotiating fair remuneration and rights is still an ongoing battle. In many language pairs, translators are expected to single-handedly scout and pitch the books they want to translate, and much of that labor goes unpaid. In a recent Twitter conversation initiated by translator Tina Koba, who I think works from French, many literary translators shared that they have either another often primary job or are financially supported by partners. So how can we, in good faith, encourage and mentor new translators to make the way into the field? In the next hour, we will be discussing some of these questions and drawing on our collective experiences and how difficult and how inspiring at times it has been for us to be part of this field, why we have stuck with it, and share as many tips and questions as possible with the audience. We also encourage everyone to ask questions using the Q&A function. We will leave at least 10 minutes at the end for audience discussion, so please make use of that. I haven't introduced myself, so I'll do that before I introduce my co-panelists. For those who are listening and not watching, I'm a kind of woman in my 40s with short brown hair, sitting against a white background. I'm working from a shared workspace in Cairo at the moment, where I'm here for a couple of weeks. And I'm wearing a white shirt and a multicolored scarf, and I'm wearing also reading glasses. I will introduce Ruth, Alice, and Anton, and then ask them each to kickstart the discussion by saying a few words about reflecting on their experience in sustaining a career in literary translation before we turn it into a more interactive conversation. So Ruth Martin is a German to English translator. She studied English literature before gaining a PhD in German. She has been translating fiction and non-fiction books since 2010 by authors ranging from Joseph Roth and Hannah Arendt to Nino Haratichvili and Shida Bazia. Am I pronouncing this right? Ruth has taught translation at Birkbeck, University of London, the University of Kent, and the Bristol Translate Summer School. She is also a former co-chair of the Translators Association, part of the UK Society of Authors. Alice Guthrie is an independent translator, editor, and researcher and curator specializing in contemporary Arabic writing. Her work often focuses on subaltern voices, activist art. Her translation of the complete short stories of the maverick Moroccan gender activist Malika Mustadrak was published in February 2022 by Feminist Press US and Socket Press UK. Alice programs the literary strand of London's Biennale Shubbak, a window on contemporary Arab culture, and has curated Arab arts events for Edinburgh International Book Festival, Outburst International Arts Festival, and Arts Canteen. She teaches undergraduate and postgraduate Arabic English translation around and about, including at the University of Birmingham, around and about translation, including at the University of Birmingham and the University of Exeter. Anton, who has just on cue joined us, is a writer and translator working in Seoul. He was born in Stockholm, Sweden, and raised in British Hong Kong, Ethiopia, Thailand, but mostly in Korea, where he's lived for 30 years. Anton was awarded the title of Person of Distinguished Service to the nation after serving with the Korean Army. Anton translates from and into Korean and has been double nominated for the International Booker Prize last year. And I am a translator from Arabic and German, and I have worked in translation and in literary translation, fiction translation, and other translation adjacent fields for the past around 12 years now. I will kickstart this by asking, does anyone have a preference I want to start? Because we didn't actually discuss this. Okay, I'm just going to go in the order that I'm seeing you on my screen. So I'm going to kickstart this by asking Ruth to share her thoughts about working as a translator.
Hi, for the audio description, I am a white woman in my early 40s, short dark hair, brown eyes, white shirt. I'm sitting in my living room, so there's a background of books and an armchair. My source language is German, and things are comparatively good for translators in that language pair. I mean, it's a major European language. A lot of books get translated from German. And that Nielsen book scan report that Nari mentioned, the research where we're not stuck on 3% anymore. German is actually, in the UK, I think it's the 5th most translated language, if we're talking about books. So, and there are all kinds of structures in place to help books get translated from German. There's funding from the cultural institutes of 3 different countries. There's new books in German. If you were listening to the publishers panel yesterday, you will have heard Molly Slight from Scribe saying that they actually have a scout on the ground in Germany looking for books. So they're actively seeking. Yeah, I know, right? It's it's quite impressive. So yeah, conditions are good. So on the scale of how hard it is to sustain a career in literary translation, I would say that I am right down the easy end. Plus, I am a white person with an English sounding name, so I'm like down the easy end, sitting on a little stepladder of privilege. But even so, I wouldn't say that it has been easy. It took me quite a while to get going. I started in 2010, and it was 5 years or so before I got to translate a novel, which is what I was aiming at. I just didn't quite manage it till then. The infrastructure for emerging translators that exists now, things like the Emerging Translators Network, and all the mentorship programs and fellowships and all the online resources that exist now were kind of in their infancy when I started out, and I really had no idea what I was doing. So I had a kind of a false start, I think, at the start of my career when I got made redundant from a full-time job. I was working in events. And I thought I'd give translation a go, but I couldn't make ends meet doing it at all. And I ended up getting another full-time job. And every time you have to do work that isn't translation, that kind of delays the progress you can make. I think if I'd had the time and money and energy to focus at any point on scouting and pitching and networking, and trying to get work rather than having to do other work that was paid, I would have got started a lot quicker. But I'd say in the last few years, my career has been on a fairly even keel. I think I'm pretty happy with where I am now. I have just been doing translation and translation related things since about 2015, which is great. I think what my idea of what success looks like has changed a lot over the last 10 years or so. I used to think when I started that it meant, winning prizes and getting rave reviews and all that kind of stuff. But now I kind of think it's very nice, but it's the icing on the cake. It's not the actual cake itself. So I think success for me now means doing work that you enjoy and believe in. And I think that I'm kind of getting there on those terms, not consistently. Not that I'm doing anything unethical in my translation practice, just doing a lot of non-fiction books that aren't topics that are really riveting. I am actually on a run of 3 consecutive novels at the moment, which is unprecedented, but it's kind of hard to say if that's a career development or some kind of blip. Workflow is still always a problem. It's always either too much or not enough. So if you take on a big book, or if you have to take on caring responsibilities, for example, and you turn down a couple of things, clients sort of forget who you are still, you go off their radar, you have to start again. But I think and I will stop talking in a minute, but I think what has sustained me through all of this is other translators. That has really been the one constant that's kind of kept me going and kept me feeling really joyful about this profession. It's having people to share problems with, to workshop your texts with, to learn from. And I think as long as I'm part of the translation community and I can keep actively trying to develop myself as a translator and learn new things, then, I'm in a good place.
Thank you so much for this, Ruth. I think many of us share this feeling that it's kind of we are stopped from leaving and moving on to other fields just because there are a few fields where people are as nice, where your colleagues, the people that work with, are as nice. I say this out of experience. Alice, can I ask you to go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. For the audio description, I am a remarkably young-looking 46-year-old white woman with quite grey hair. And I'm, like the rest of the panel, wearing white today. And I'm against a busy background of my office, which I was trying to check people couldn't read too clearly the various weird things on my notice board. So apologies if you mind. So I think I'm going to be a bit more, excuse me, got a cough. I'm going to be a bit more pessimistic than Ruth, and that might well, or negative, and that might well reflect the difference between, the sort of structural difference between our language pairs. Because when you talk about, having funding from 3 different nations, I mean, I know about this. German is one of the examples that we in the Arabic English sector kind of, use. Imagine if it was like that kind of talk. All of those things you listed, we don't have any of. So, but also, I mean, I think everything that I'm going to say, maybe I'm quite slow in how I work. Maybe some people are miraculously a lot faster and can do really high quality work really, really fast. I think maybe 1 or 2 people can, but I think most people can't. Anyway, I'm just going to go through the nice prompts that Nari gave us to respond to. So in terms of sort of ups and downs of my career, definitely, the original up was kind of, getting published initially, but which was back in 2008, and realizing that I loved translation and enjoyed it and was good at it. And then the downs has been realizing that I can't really afford to do it. And that has been the sort of, that dynamic has kind of continued throughout. So I mean, it's sad to say it, but what has really become clear to me in the last few years has been that to be sustaining a career in literary translation, as in, and literary translation is what you do all the time. Well, actually, it doesn't even have to be that you're doing it most. To be continuously able to do it, I guess, you have to either have intergenerational wealth, a salaried partner, another career / pension, or, which I think some people do, the capacity to sort of work 70, 80-hour weeks. I definitely don't have that. So there's a kind of demand that you either come from a certain level of privilege or heteronormative kind of financial dynamic, or that you have this sort of bionic, over-functioning capacity, so that those of us who have maybe like non-typical health situations or caring responsibilities or whatever, we're really out. And that sort of took me quite a while to fully understand. And I do feel, so I'm going to start on this real downer note, but I do feel that needs really spelling out and acknowledging more, because I feel like there's a sort of, that we're a bit in denial about it sometimes, and it needs to be, I can see someone in the comments saying they really appreciate it. It's like, that didn't really come clear to me for a long time. And I think especially, different intersectionalities, right? But women and probably people of color and queer people, a lot of us feel, we're already so used to having to do more and try harder. And, so we're quite ready to be kind of told, like, you should be making a living out of this, so just keep working, and it's like, if there's a kind of cultural dynamic around that, I think that's quite corrosive. Anyway, another prompt was, how have conditions worsened or improved since I've been working? I have to say they've worsened in real terms, because the sort of observed rate, the farcical observed rate that, is, heaven forbid we ever change it, that is used by other, which is the Translators Association in the UK, but is taken on by other organisations, I don't even know why, has been stuck at a really, detrimentally low level for years. And people really lean on that, right? And so that hasn't gone, it's gone up by £5 recently, but it hasn't gone up in line with inflation. But also in my personal work, the conditions have worsened in real terms, because my growing expertise isn't remunerated, other than in non-literary translation or as a consultant, yes, and like I'm a professor of practice now, I've got a practice-based appointment in the university, but that's not reflected in the rates that I get offered, by publishers or whatever. So I think that's really problematic as well, that like there's a lot of emphasis on supporting emerging translators, but there's not really any emphasis on supporting people's, the wealth of people's experience, I feel. And then in terms of kind of what sustained me or not, I'm able to work freelance just with work involving Arabic, and I've been living off that for completely with no other work for about 12 years, I think. And so what sustained me in doing that is, my middle class white privilege, so having a sort of strong safety net around me, and also a lot of because the important thing to acknowledge here is that even if you don't have a trust fund or you don't have a salaried partner, if you don't feel too scared about getting into debt, if you have like access to short-term credit, I can borrow a few £100 off my dad and pay it back or whatever. That is a whole level where you can take risk, even if you're not being given like a family credit card or whatever. And I've also been in subsidized housing. So I've had artist solidarity from another translator and actually from another artist in another field. So for 6 years, I've been paying under market rent. So that's enabled me in 3 different houses. And then I suppose, a willingness to live in a certain way, but that kind of comes back to the middle class, not being too scared of financial risk thing. But, I have been living in a sort of artist garret way, in a way, albeit with really, nice organic food. So, I think that's kind of the main things that I was going to say. Oh, yeah. And so just one more. Have I gone over time, Nari? Have I been talking for like 10 minutes? You're muted anyway.
No, you have time for one more thing. Go on.
So the thing that I really wanted to say was about the link between low pay and quality, because we've got a perfect storm, I would say, in Arabic to English literary translation. We've got this perfect storm where we've got, because we're in the context of Orientalism and all of that stuff, right? And because it's so badly needs decolonizing. So we've got this kind of whole culture about Arabic is this inherently unintelligible, can only be approximated Eastern thing. It's not, a modern language, it's some other. And then that comes together with the really low pay and the sort of almost gaslighting about the low pay and the privilege, so that people end up trying to work really, really quickly and cutting corners. And then because there's no bilingual editorial input or kind of, quality checking comparative work, then what you end up with is really, really bad, a lot of really bad translations in publication, I would say, with notable exceptions. And there's a whole culture that's like creating that and perpetuating it. So yeah, total doom, and really looking forward to talking more and having more questions. I'll hand over.
I knew it was going to go downhill from Ruth, mainly because of the language discrepancy. But there's so many things that I want to pick up in what you said. First, Anton, I want to hear your thoughts. And I also want to apologize for giving you the shortest introduction, but that's because the written introduction that I have for you is very short. The written bio I have for you is very short. But also you're a celebrity, so maybe you don't need that much of an introduction. Please go ahead and tell us what you have.
Thank you so much, Nariman. Yeah, very, very interesting discussion going on. For the audio description, I am technically I'm middle-aged Asian man, Asian in the American definition, not the UK definition, but I have really great skin, and I'm wearing a white shirt, and I am in a dark apartment in Songdo, South Korea. So I'm asked this question a lot, actually. People are less interested in what books I translate, but how much money I make. And they ask me, how did I do it? Well, first of all, for Korean translators are actually in very high demand, non-literary translators. Literary translation is a very, very small market for Korean. I'll get to that in a moment. But Korean translators, if you work in anything from finance, news, law. I was a legal translator because I have a law degree. We're always in high demand, and you will always be able to make money, and you will always be able to supplement your other projects that do not pay as well. For example, if you love translating poetry, then you'll do some contracts on the contract translation of the sign, and then you'll translate a sample for a poetry book, and then you will try to market it and try to publish that. And that's how I started out. And I became a full-time literary translator only in 2018. And I was actually a computer programmer. I was a full stack web developer. And I got a grant to translate a book, and I was like, ooh, so I'll be a full stack web developer during the week. I had a job at a small tech firm, and I will translate this book in the weekend. And then I won another grant, and I was like, okay, I guess I can translate 2 books in the weekend and do my job. My husband might divorce me, but it's technically possible, so I'll do it. And then I got another grant, and I was like, okay, I can't translate 3 books and have this job at the same time. I have to quit something. And so I quit the tech job. And ever since 2018, it's been once I'm done with this book, in 4 months, then I'm going to have to go back to tech. And so that has been going on since 2002. I do not have a guarantee of employment for more than that. Right now, my runway, I call it my runway. Right now, my runway ends in June of 2023. So not even a year from now. So I don't know if I will have a job after June 2022 to 2023. It's just that, stuff has come up, and I'm kind of do you know the animation where, they're making a railway, as the train is going, and then they take out the railway in the back and then put it in the front, and then that. That's what my life has been since 2018. Sustainable is a really, really important word in this presentation. And I think that's the key that you need to kind of zoom in on. Anyone, well, not anyone, but a lot of people can translate maybe 1 book, in their career, or maybe 2, even 3, and then never translate another book again. And this is very common in my language combination. For a sustainable career, you really have to be a little bit more calculating than you would for any other type of translation job. This isn't something obviously where you work for a company and then the company pays you X amount of salary. So what I kind of did one day was, so I I live in Songdo and Seoul. So first I said, like, what is the average income in Seoul? Like, it's okay if I never become a millionaire or a billionaire, but I would like to be, not uncomfortable. I would like to make, as much as my peers or whatever. So what is the like household average income of my city? And a lot of people don't know this about the city that they live in, or like the city that they want to live in, but look it up. It's very easily Googleable. And for Seoul, it turned out to be, the year that I checked, there was something like 45 million won. Now, this sounds like a lot of money. It's like 30,000 pounds, I guess. And so I was like, okay, I can't be a millionaire translating books, but maybe I can make 30,000 pounds a year. Like, maybe I can do that. And if I cobble together enough stuff, teaching jobs and tutoring, maybe even, or like, then I can have time to translate my books. And and not starve to death. So I recommend everyone kind of like look at that number, like get a number, like have that number as the number that you want to achieve at some point. And as long as you have that number, then you feel like, okay, I'm going to be okay as long as I have this number. Now, there are many factors that go into this number. Like Alice gave like a really great list of things like mitigating factors. For example, like maybe you live with your parents, and which is a totally fine thing to do these days. Maybe you have a partner who can chip off like, I don't know, 15,000 pounds of that. Then you only have to think about like 15,000 pounds. Again, this is household income. It's not, a single person income. And so because like the other thing is that, and I hope you have this problem one day, when you become successful enough, people keep giving you work and you can get really greedy, and then you can just like work all the time. Alice had a really great expression for this, a bionic overfunctioning capacity. So I kind of have this, and the danger of this is that you can kind of like run your body to the ground. And like, even just like, it's a very fine line to cross. Like even yesterday, I got very irritated at a friend for no reason because I was so stressed. And then after that, I was like, why am I taking this so seriously? Like, why do I care if I don't get this contract? Like, just forget about the contract. Like, why are you giving away? Why are you putting so much of your emotion into this? And it was because I was greedy. I wanted another book. Like that's what it came down to. But why not? But just why not give up this book and make a little less money? I'd still be making, my target amount. And so for your own sanity, you kind of like need to know like how far you're willing to go, like how much money that you can do, you want to make. And so I really recommend doing that. And we've been talking about like, how popular our languages are, like vis-a-vis literary translation. And the thing about Korean is that it's simply like there aren't many Korean books being published. Like we say there are about 10 books a year that get published. This is a very interesting number. So I said 45 million won household income is the average for Seoul. It's about 14 million. Like if you translate a Korean book, LTI Korea will give you about 14 million won in grants. So that means you have to translate basically 3 books a year in order to do this work full time. And there are 10 books. That means that there's enough room for 3 full-time literary translators. Those 3 translators are Anton, Sora Kim Russell, and Janet Hong. Like those spots are taken. So until the day that one of us die, Sora Kim Russell's only a couple of years older than I am, and Janet Hong is, we're all around the same age. So like none of us are going to die anytime soon. So until the day that one of us like kicks the bucket, or I don't know, Janet decides to take a couple of years off so that she can see her children through high school or something. Like until something like that happens, like this is just going to be like the lay of. So you kind of have to like either be ready to really kind of you expand the market and be like, oh, I am going to make it so that there are, even despite these 3 people like in these slots, I'm going to still be able to find a market for 3 more Korean books. Like you have to be extremely, extremely determined to do that. So otherwise, you kind of have to like cobble together like all these different like freelance things. And again, Korean translation, I have taught translation students, and they all have great jobs. And like a lot, like most of them make more money than I do. So yeah, so it's actually not too bad of a landscape for that. The other thing that I kind of wanted to kind of mention, because people in literary translation don't talk about this a lot, but some of our language groups, like they have funding for samples. And I noticed that Paul Russell Garrett is in the audience, and like he also mentioned this in another talk that we were kind of like in together, where like a lot of our money actually does come from samples, and like not like complete books, but sometimes like if someone in a funding body like knows you or has your resume, then I think Ruth mentioned this, like if they know you, then they keep using you, because it takes like a lot of energy for funding bodies and companies to like find a new translator every time. So they tend to use the people that they use. It's more efficient for them because they're like, oh, I know Anton can deliver on time and at a certain quality, so like why don't we just give it to him? And so they kind of get lazy like that. If you are in that kind of position, I try to kind of give my work to like up and coming translators that I know, and I've connected quite a few Korean translators at this point with work that otherwise would have come to me. But but it's very important to like cultivate those clients, especially if they're a sample funding body, because that's a lot of literary translation that you get paid to do. And I can't tell you like how to do it. I can only tell you how to do it from my language group, which is Korean to English. And there's one big body, the Korean Publication Industry Promotion Agency, KPIPA, and they very sporadically look for ask translators to submit their resumes, and you kind of have to like keep your eyes peeled for that. I think the next call for resumes will probably be like at the end of this year, like December, so soon. But yeah, so that's kind of like a big chunk of money. Like last April, I basically translated an entire book's worth of samples. Like I think there were like 5 samples, and there were entire book's worth of samples, and that was an entire book's worth of money as well. So yeah, sample funding, very, very important. Okay, I think that is all that I wanted to.
Thank you, Anton. That was a great start, and I'm going to pick up on the samples question immediately, because that was like definitely one of the things that I had at the back of my mind. Can I first check that you guys can hear me clearly? And like if people can write in the chats as well if they can, because I know that there've been complaints about the echo, so I've come really close to my laptop microphone now. I hope that helps. Okay, but can you make out what I'm saying at least? It's still echoing. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to try to embody that. Okay. Savat says that it makes me sound like a divine baby. I'm booming down. Ruth is booming down on you. I'll try to project. I'll stay close to the screen. Apologies for the close-up. So Anton, you said that you get paid for samples, and I know that this has been a discussion in translation circles, that who gets paid for a sample and who doesn't. From Arabic to English translators, I don't know of anyone who's ever got paid for a sample before. I mean, you could get a grant to cover some of the work, but I wonder what's the experience of then like preparing pitches and sending out one after the other. If no one is actually helping you out with that part of things, and you have to scout and pitch. Alice, do you want to tell us what you think about that? And then next, I want to follow up by thinking about how, if there is anything, like I'm drawing on the German experience, Ruth, so just like you start thinking about this, if there's anything that can be done to expand the market, that could, like what can we learn from the German to English translation market? Alice, please go first.
Yeah, I'm going to just keep bringing the doom, I think. Sorry, I very rarely can afford to do samples and pitching. Like it's it comes down to nowadays being like, okay, what do I choose to subsidize, and what do I see as, and we'll probably talk about activism, won't we, later, but I often will write back to people that ask me to do, for example, a book report for £120 or something, which is about 5 days work for me if I do it properly, reading a whole book and really writing, a synopsis. And I'm quite slow reading in Arabic. I don't know, it depends how long the book is. And again, if you're the kind of person that's going to do that on a Sunday morning over coffee, but I'm not that person. So if you're just a kind of regular, like, I work hard, I have a certain pace, but I'm not doing it like in the bath or whatever, I have to sort of really differentiate as to what is something that I want to subsidize and support. And what ends up happening is that unless it's something that I'm mega passionate about, if it's just something that I think, it should happen and it's an important book, it ends up just falling by the wayside because I'm just trying to stay afloat and stay afloat in the bath and stay, and pay for life. And so it's like these things are at a real premium because we don't have grants for that or whatever. They're just at such a premium, and they're all fighting for my, my scarce bits of basically sort of pro bono work that I can do. So it's so interesting to hear, Anton, about your scene, and I know this from other language pairs, but it's just completely not the case with Arabic to English. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think coupled with that is also the problem that it sometimes feels that, and this is similar to what you described in the case of Korean, Anton, there are more translators willing to translate books than the number of books that are being taken up by publishers. So then it feels like this whole pitching game, if you're like, it really does not pay off if that's the case. If you know in advance that you're going to do unpaid labor and the probability of you getting some work out of it is really low. So to follow up on that, what can we do to increase publishers' interest in a particular source language? I know that it's always been historically easier for European languages, but do you have thoughts about how some of the approaches in German can be applied to other language pairs?
Do you know what? I don't know if I do, apart from New Books in German, which is a great magazine, but that has this whole structure behind it. And that's kind of the thing about German, is that, like I said at the start, all of the structures are there and they've been there for years. And I mean, I get paid for samples. I don't do loads of them, but I do maybe 4 or 5 a year. But I'm working for the German language publishers. They're the ones who commission them. So I get paid a reasonable rate for them. And then they end up on the desks of editors in the UK and the US, and that's how I've got a lot of work, actually. So unless you can persuade the source language publishers to actually commission samples and be a bit more active in trying to get into the UK and US markets, or you can persuade the foreign rights agents who are out there to commission more samples, I don't really know what you do.
Do they then, like, what's the uptake then from Anglophone publishers of books that end up on their desks if they're being commissioned by the German language publishers?
I mean, the Anglophone publishers know what they want. It's not kind of a guarantee, and the German language publishers don't have a complete grasp of the Anglophone market either. So it's a kind of an imprecise science. But I get the feeling that there's actually quite a decent success rate. And there are publishers who read New Books in German who are actually actively looking for stuff. So,
okay. So one of the questions that I have in mind is whether, even with German, if there seems to be like really growing interest in translation as a profession. We might come to a point where even the German to English market has become saturated. I don't expect you to have the answer to that, but since many of the people in the audience today will be attending the Advanced German to English workshop, so there are people who already work as German to English translators, and I imagine that this is a question that they're interested in. one of the things that I think is probably encouraging this interest in translation and in translated literature is probably translators' visibility, which is something that, like, I know I've discussed this with all of you at one point or another. Like, it's something that most of us are invested in. We want our work to be acknowledged as our work. I wonder if we can also problematize that. I'm thinking of a short talk that can be found on the BCLT YouTube channel by Mona Karim, where she criticizes the capitalistic logic of visibility. And she says that this is something that is kind of puts the focus in like not necessarily the most important part of what we do as translators, and it makes us like this kind of tendency to brand ourselves in a way, and it takes away from the power of invisibility that maybe translators have traditionally had, that allowed them to do more subversive work. I don't know what you all think about that, and I would love to hear your views. So let's go for Anton, because you order.
I can't imagine what power there is in invisibility. Like, I would have to look at that talk, but I feel like, well, it's very dangerous to have this kind of like translator as branding, because all of that branding work takes so much time and effort that's not paid. And it's ridiculous that translators have to become famous so that we can get work. That's a very strange, like, weirdness of logic. But I also do know that as a translator of color, if I'm not visible, then people will completely walk over me. Like, people's eyes will just travel over like what I write and like they will literally not listen to what I say, just because I'm like not white. Like, that's happened to me so many times in publishing, and where like you're at some kind of function and like they're talking to everybody, but they're not talking to you, and you know why? Because everyone else is white. And like, if you're white, they automatically think that, oh, you're probably a better translator than that Asian guy who's probably, some language servant that you can exploit at, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's so for us, it's like, it's not a matter of branding so much as survival. Like, if we don't do it, then we become invisible. And but on the other hand, like, it takes a lot out of you, and you have to spend so much time doing marketing. I think it's helpful though to think of marketing not as like, oh, marketing, like I'm so above it, but like marketing is just like this weird word that we use for connecting people who would really enjoy the book with the book itself. Like, until I tell people a book that Curse Bunny exists, they're not gonna, find it on their own. I really have to like tell them like, oh, here's this book. This is the story. Some head pops out of a toilet. Isn't that cool? Like, I have to kind of like do the whole thing, do the whole spiel where I tell them about something, because Ruth mentioned that like, Anglophone publishers like know what they want. Like, they may for, I don't know, for German maybe, but like for Korean, they really don't. Like, they have no idea what's out there, and they have no idea what Korean literature is capable of. They think, it's all K-drama or whatever. So I have to show them, look, I have to surprise them with my product, with my book. I have to be like, hey, this is something that you've never imagined. And so I have to, and for me, that's what branding is, and that's what marketing is. I have to be the person that is always bringing you cool stuff to look at because you've never imagined it before. And I think, like, nowadays I have so many people, like readers, like through social media or whatever, like say, oh, I picked up this book because your name was on it. Like, I've heard that so many times now. And it's very, very flattering. It's very gratifying. But I kind of see what they mean, because I've always made an effort to pick the books that are surprising and that, that are exciting. And I know that will get readers excited. And now readers associate the brand with like, oh, this book is going to be surprising and it's going to be really cool and really edgy. So yeah. It's important that we do that. The thing about translation itself is that we are bringing people we're connecting people. Like we're using language to connect people. So translators are actually very natural marketers. And, if you have it, why not exploit it?
Okay, so so the translator's brand helps sell books, basically. I want to move on to the audience questions because there's so many of them, but I also have a feeling Alice had something to say that might, because when I mentioned Mona Karim's talk,
I was
really excited.
remembering that I really enjoyed the talk, but
okay.
Nothing urgent to say.
So nothing urgent at the point of visibility. Okay, feel free to jump back in and pick that up. But thank you everyone for your questions. I'm going to. I think it's very ambitious to answer all of them, but I'm going to try to pick as many as possible. And if I can ask the three of you to please make your answers succinct as possible. So the first question I want to pick up is why, and this is something that's actually, when I was introducing the panel, I was also aware of literary translation. Why do people choose to identify as literary translators? This is from an anonymous attendee. I don't have their name. Does it mean that they're hobbyists rather than full-timers? Is it something to do with prestige? Do they translate out of passion rather than to make a living? This is a question to the whole panel. Please go ahead.
Can I go? I would not say that I'm a literary translator. If people ask me what I do, I would usually say I translate books for a living because that is pretty much what I do. But half of the books that I translate are non-fiction, and some of that non-fiction is academic. And I think the sort of literary, non-literary cutoff is a little bit arbitrary, and people draw it in different places. So it's sort of meaningless. Yeah.
I'm a full-time literary translator. I make a living out of it. This is not just my passion. Like, I pay the bills with it. So I don't think this question is for me.
Does that mean that this you only translate books that are considered literary, or are they also? Because I know you also work on fiction books.
I have a very expansive,
a
very expansive definition of what literary is, and so so it's that's going to be like. And also, I feel like you're still a literary translator if you teach literary translation. If that's like your main source of income, like I don't do teaching. But if you're a literary translator who does and that's like your main source, and then you do a book occasionally, that's still a literary translator to me. So that's how I define it.
I actually don't really like. It's a shorthand. So it depends who I'm talking to, because my answer for what I do otherwise has to be like I'm a consultant working. All my work revolves around contemporary Arabic literary and arts media, by which time they've wandered up. It's like so I use it sometimes as a shorthand, but I don't and I think actually for quite a long time I did sort of identify as a translator, because it was like the thing that I was the most passionate about of the work that I was doing. Probably everything that I do is adjacent to it, and so it's kind of a hub for things to
Okay, I think you've kind of all at various points, either at the beginning or now, kind of answered the question of what else do you do other than translation, than literary in the wider sense translation, because there is a question about that as well from the audience. But does anyone want to mention something that they think would be particularly interesting for people to know about that you do that's not translation or not translating books?
That we do for money?
No, you do for money.
Well, I can talk about what other people do. So teaching is a very big literary translation adjacent work. In Korea, there are a lot of editors who are translators. And Korea has a lot of writer translators. And there's such a variety of teaching jobs. Like you don't have to be, a university professor to be a teacher.
I heard yesterday about somebody who's enabling themselves to be a literary translator. I won't say where and what language pair, by running the major magic mushroom dealership for a major city.
That definitely wins the most interesting.
So there you go. Is that what you were fishing for, Nari?
I did not know about that, but if I had known, I would definitely pushed for it. So
I was like, I might try and mention that on the panel because that's so wild.
that's great.
I've mentioned it.
So there is so actually kind of thinking about the teaching translation side of things and offering translation workshops, and like this is something that many of us do and have done and will continue to do as a way to make a living, and also so we enjoy it, and it's fun to talk about translation to other people who are interested in it. There is the question of whether we should be encouraging people to come into a field that we're saying is actually quite saturated in many language pairs. And one question from the audience is why this is why we're even wondering about this. Nobody ever wonders whether we should encourage people to become novelists or short story writers. People offer, like established writers offer mentorships to emerging writers all the time, and the same happens in other creative fields. So why are we questioning that in translation? And I think it's also a related question would be, should it be questioned in other fields as well?
I mean, doesn't that lead us really into something else that we probably wanted to talk about, which is the kind of, is it an art or is it a science, or, you know, is it a sort of, should we be
labor or art?
Labor, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, you know, and so it's kind of about that, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a good question, and it's a funny one because I mean, my sister Joanna Guthrie is a quite successful poet, but she's got a day job. She's always going to have a day job, I imagine. You know, it's like, and no one kind of questions that, right? And you could say that there isn't like enormous kudos for poets, published poets, right? But I think there is more kudos for them than there is for us. So we're in this kind of funny limbo place, aren't we, really, where we're not really, this is also with the invisibility thing, we're not really seen as artists, but we're also not really paid like technicians either. So that's my answer is going to trail off there. Someone else kick in.
I think we have a responsibility as people who do this either full-time or not, to be realistic, and that's why I'm glad that we're doing this panel today, because you know, people who are looking at this profession, I mean, I teach on the Bristol Translates summer school, but I would never say to anyone there, yeah, come do literary translation, it's a really viable profession. You know, I think I'm fairly realistic about the prospects and what else you might have to do. But yeah, we really need to be.
I think, sorry, can I just jump back in? Sorry, Anton. I just want to quickly say, I think part of the reason that I have, you know, strong feelings about it is because I think that translation is really important and that it should be properly paid so it can be properly done, you know, and like there's maybe a separate conversation to be had about, like, I wish everyone could live off their art, and like, you know, like what about musicians, and like if we use Spotify and we know that we're basically exploiting our favorite artists, you know, there's all so much problematics, but just in our field, you know, I just sort of feel like translation is really important. It's not being in my pair, it's not really being able to be done properly because of the stuff, you know, the mechanics of the different baked in inequalities and so on, and exploitation, and that's a real shame for the world. I guess that's kind of, you know, why I want to be like really pushing about this. But yeah, it would be irresponsible to tell young people or anyone that's, you know, not in the career that this is like really a career to have, certainly in my pair. Sorry, Anton, you had like your mouth open ready and I cut in.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I completely agree with you, Alice and Ruth. Like, the thing is, like, poets, aspiring painters, aspiring novelists, they all get told, oh, you can't do this for a living. It's not just us, really. It's everyone, like everyone in the arts, for example. It just shows that that's, I think, the clearest evidence that literary translation is an art, because this is what people keep telling, you know, our students. And that we're just, you know, being responsible adults. You know, we can't guarantee you like this is going to be a position. Translation, however, I don't like, especially for my language pair, even if you fail at becoming a literary translator, I mean, I don't even know what that means, because like you can always publish a book next year and then you'll become a literary translator. So it seems like a very low threshold to me. But like, even if you don't become a literary translator, like you can have a really, really great and fulfilling career. I don't know if I can say the same for creative writing majors and, you know, actor majors and whatever, but I can say it for translation majors. working between Korean and English, like you will still have a really great career. So I encourage my students, like, you learn translation, like come to translation school, like get a translation degree, like don't go to LTA Korea Academy, but learn translation somewhere and do it, because it could be really fun. It'll take you to all sorts of places, and it's about the adventure. And if you're very, very focused and very, very lucky, and you prepare yourself for luck, then maybe luck will come to you. And you could do this literary, like this book translation, like for a living. Although like this is not the most glamorous translation job that I've ever had. Like I feel like interpreters have a much more glamorous lifestyle than I do. Like, so it's really, yeah, I mean, it's like every other, it's really like every other arts job. We're not special in that regard.
I think it gets confusing because translation cuts across so many fields. So when people talk about their work as like being a translator, it's kind of it's not clear whether like, is this an arts job? Is this a profession? Is this like a technical profession? And this, I think this clarification is really helpful. It's possible to have a successful translation career, but not actually make any money out of literary translation. You'll be translating literature, fiction, and like poetry, but you're making a living through other types of translation. I also want to venture that you can be an established literary translator without really translating that many books or any books at all. You can just publish short stories whenever you can, and this is a way of sustaining a literary translation strand in your life while you're doing other work that pays the bills. There is a question about whether you've had you've turned down any book translation, and why. Like what prompts you to turn down translation work?
I turn stuff down all the time because I can't afford to do it, sadly. I'd have published loads more books if if people pay the observed rate, then I would probably, it's including all the editorial time and stuff, I'd probably be getting under 100 quid a day, and before tax, with no health time off, what's it called, sick pay. So yeah, I turn things down for that reason a lot, and then I also sometimes turn things down if it's what I see as dodgy funding sources.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I turn stuff down a lot as well now. Not usually for any reason other than I'm too busy, which is a great reason to be able to turn stuff down. But thinking about responsibility, I think we then do also have to have a responsibility if we're recommending other people for jobs that we can't do, to not just like recommend the same 3 people the whole time, and to recommend colleagues who are looking for their first book, or whose work that we know through workshops or whatever. I do that a lot. I try and give for every book I turn down, I give at least 3 names of people who could do that job. And also when you're turning something down, to say why you're turning it down and be honest to the person who's trying to commission you, because if it's a ridiculous deadline, or if the pay is not good enough, then you're not doing anyone any favors by just saying, sorry, I can't do that, here's some other people you could try. You need to start that kind of negotiating process for them.
I want to ask one final question that brings together a couple of the remaining questions from the audience, and it's to do with alternatives to doing samples if you're working in a language pair that doesn't pay you for samples, or you have to do a lot of the work yourself. Have any of you had other experiences of routes in to get work to publishers or get publishers' interest? And the related question is also how to raise publishers' interest in a language that they're not currently translating from. So I know these are things that have already been touched on. So if you're approaching a publisher that you think they'd be interested in that book, but they've never translated from Korean before, for instance, Anton, so like how do you then sell a book to them in a language that they haven't published from before? Just final thoughts and tips, because we're going to sadly have to wrap up this conversation soon.
Wait, without a sample?
have you, well, either with or without, this was kind of a double question, but the first half is like, if there are other alternatives that you've experimented with to get work, or to get the right contacts, maybe for that might get you commissioned to do work.
To get a book? No, it's all
just samples. It's all samples. Yeah.
Oh, they're like, if you like Ruth said, like if you know a translator, if you get to know a translator who is, gets a lot of work that they can't do, and maybe you can like, hey, so I exist. Here's my resume. Like, if you ever need to recommend someone, can you, maybe consider me? Like that worked for me in the beginning of my career, and I try to do it for other translators, but I have to know you exist, and I have to know you're out there, and I have to know like what you're capable of. So like there's like a bunch of translators that I know that I've worked with and workshop with, and so I'm like, oh, this sounds like a Claire Richards book, I'm gonna send it over to her. Oh, this sounds like a Shauna Tan book, I'm gonna send it over to her. Like, so you have those moments, and yeah, so maybe like try to befriend, network, I don't know, something like get to know like a translator who might be able to like take you under their wing, because it's really beneficial for me too to be able to give these recommendations and to be able to do it like it's clout for me too. It's not like I'm doing it 100% out of like the goodness of my heart. It's also like, I'm very proud to be able to connect you to Claire Richards because she's so terrific, and I know that you're gonna have a great you're going to do a great book together. And so like, maybe down the line when I don't have work, and, one of these people is going to give me work. Like, that's how it works. Yeah. So maybe
one alternative is called pitching, network with other translators, make friends. Ruth, Alice, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anybody watching who's trying to get started in Arabic, but, feel free to send me a sample of your work with the original. And because I quite often, but I only recommend based on when I've actually read people's work with the original. And given that the situation is quite dire in terms of like good work getting done in our combination, I'm always on the lookout for more people, and I commission bits and pieces myself and stuff. So I would probably, if I was getting started like that, I'd probably cold call some established translators in the language pair. This might not make sense in another language pair, and be like, hey, you want to see 3 paragraphs that I did with the original? And then like brace yourself in case they write back and show you all your mistakes.
Yeah, no, 100% do that. I'm very easy to find on the internet. You can totally email me.
Thank you all so much for your time and really interesting and challenging thoughts on translation. I think we've had a mix of, yes, this is a great field to be in, but also find another job and do it. So I feel like we could have talked for at least half hour just based on the questions and the Q&A alone. Sorry, couldn't pick more of those up, but I hope we've addressed many of people's concerns, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening or rest of the day, depending on where you are.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mary.
Solidarity to Allah.